well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Welcome to another edition of Bearing Arms, Cam and Company. My name is Cam Edwards. I'm so glad you've joined us on the program today. Steve Gatowski of The Reload is going to be with us here in just a matter of moments. We're going to be talking about on the surface, it seems like a very strange reaction from a lot of gun control activists to the fact that an armed citizen was able to stop this targeted attack at an Indiana mall on Sunday evening. When you've got, the Brady campaign's Chris Brown calling this guy a vigilante, Shannon Watts basically saying this guy should be arrested for violating mall policy, when the mayor, the police chief, even the mall management praising this individual for his heroic life-saving actions, it is a little odd. But you start to think about a little bit more, and what else are the gun control groups going to say here? Because they're not about reasonable regulations. They're not about common sense laws. It's not even a matter of I support the Second Amendment, but given the reaction that we've seen here, I'm left with the impression, and I think that I'm supposed to be left with this impression, that gun control groups dislike guns so much that even when a legal gun owner uses a firearm to stop a mass shooting, gun control advocates are going to be upset by this. Of course, they would say, well, we don't want this mass shooting to begin with. Well, nobody does. But the fact remains, they are, in essence, arguing that there should not have been an armed citizen there at the mall to put a stop to this attack, that it should have continued until police arrived, however many minutes later. And I got to tell you, I know the gun control lobby loves to talk about how, the vast majority of Americans support what we believe in. I don't think a vast majority of Americans think that the individual who, again, stopped this attack is a vigilante and should be prosecuted or charged. No, I think most Americans agree with the mayor of Greenwood, Indiana, Mark Myers, in calling this individual a hero. But let's get Steve Gatowski's take. Take a look and listen. Steven, it's good to see you again, sir. Thanks very much for coming on the program.
Hey, thanks for having me. I always enjoy coming on.
Absolutely. And, I wanted to get your take on what we have seen over the past, really, I guess, 36, maybe 48 hours or so since the news broke about this shooting in Greenwood, Indiana at the Greenwood Park Mall, a shooting that was stopped by an armed citizen or a vigilante, depending on how you look at it. This really, the response from the gun control activists, on the one hand, it seems extraordinary. I mean, here's a guy who stopped a mass shooting, and gun control activists are complaining about it. But the more you think about it, what else would they say? I mean, as much as they try to present themselves as, reasonable and common sense, as often as we hear, I support the Second Amendment, but, they've made no bones about it. They believe that this country will be better off if there are no Americans who are carrying firearms, who are exercising their Second Amendment rights, not that they see it as a right. So, in that respect, they can't praise a guy who stopped an armed shooting, particularly if this guy was carrying in violation of mall policy, right? I mean, if you're a gun control activist, you can't say anything that might encourage somebody to carry a gun in self-defense, much less, carry a gun in a gun-free zone.
Yeah, I mean, that certainly seems to be the calculation that they're making on this. The response from, Shannon Watts and Chris Brown of Brady has been to attack the guy who ended the mass shooting rather than focus elsewhere. I mean, to give Giffords credit, they took a different path, I guess, at least from what I've seen publicly. I don't, maybe I've missed a statement from them, but they just focus on the idea that people were killed, and so we need stronger gun laws, and just sort of ignore how the shooting came to an end, which just seemed like a more prudent way for a gun control group to respond. Because obviously you're unlikely to find a gun control group that's going to praise the civilian who stopped the shooting, because it goes against their core beliefs about how to prevent these sorts of incidents and whether or not carrying a gun is good. So they are backed in a corner in that sense, that they're not going to come out and praise this person while everyone else is. But it does seem odd that some leaders of these groups feel the need to come out and attack this person. I don't know that is going to go over very well with most people.
I don't think it is either. And I think it does, certainly for gun owners and for activists, I think it reminds us that despite the talk of reasonableness, there really is an extreme agenda at heart. But I wonder for how many Americans who don't follow this issue all that closely, that first response when they heard, Chris Brown from Brady calling this guy a vigilante, I just wonder how many of them said, what, are you crazy? I mean, he stopped the attack. When even the mall management comes out and calls this guy a good Samaritan and, praises him. They don't say, listen, it's great that he did what he did, but we're not letting him back on the property because he, violated our weapons policy. No, they just praise this guy. I also wonder if there's not a great deal of concern among gun control activists that this is going to lead to what will be, I think, a very uncomfortable discussion for them about gun-free zones in general. You and I have talked about this before. There have been plenty of these targeted attacks where it seems like, or maybe we even know that this individual specifically sought out a place where there was very unlikely to be an armed response. And had this 22-year-old legal gun owner follow the mall's policy, he would have been unarmed when he was there at the mall with his girlfriend. This guy would have had an unimpeded ability to attack innocent people for at least several more minutes until officers arrived. And we're seeing this play out, Stephen, right now in New York, where, Governor Hochul is basically, and the New York Democrats basically declared, most of the publicly accessible areas in the state to be sensitive places, to be these gun-free zones. And unlike Indiana, violating that policy in New York is a felony offense. If you accidentally walk into a business that has not said, yes, you're allowed to come in, not only could you lose your ability to keep and bear arms forevermore, you could go to prison for several years. And I think, again, a lot of Americans may not be aware of that and would have a real problem with the idea of this armed citizen in Indiana being prosecuted and being put in prison for what ultimately saved God knows how many lives.
Yeah. And, it's interesting because Shannon Watts originally tweeted claiming that this guy had broken the law, which isn't true in Indiana. There's no force of law to those, no gun policies. It's kind of like a no shirt, no shoes policy where, if they ask you to leave and you don't, then you could be arrested for trespassing. Some jurisdictions might arrest you for knowingly carrying against a no gun policy, but, it's not an actual crime. And interestingly, it would be in New York where they helped write those laws, right? That Brady and Everytown helped create those laws that do include really very harsh punishments for people who carry against a store policy. And so she initially called it illegal probably because she wants it to be illegal, and she deleted that tweet later, from what I understand. But you can see the pretty stark contrast here. I mean, I don't think that most Americans would view what this guy did, and his name's Eli. I think it was his last name. It's just looking at a name we should actually know in one of these situations instead of the shooter's name. But I don't know that most Americans would look at what happened and say that guy is the problem. He should be in jail because he didn't follow a mall policy. Which, by the way, in most of these malls, I'm sure any mall you've ever been into, they don't usually post no gun signs around in any noticeable area. I've never seen one at a mall. It might be in the fine print on their website somewhere, but most of them don't actually post signs that say no guns. Which you often, most states require some sort of actual signage to that effect. I don't know what the mall was like in this case, but regardless, most people are not going to be terribly upset that he violated mall policy when he saved a bunch of lives. I mean, that's just the bottom line.
Well, that is the bottom line. And again, I think it shows that, these individuals who, and by the way, Elijah Dixon, I believe, is the name of the armed citizen. The person on the other side of this equation, whose name I will not use during this interview, we have seen time and again the amount of plan and the obsession that these individuals have with carrying out these attacks. I mean, this is something that they are fixated on. It occupies, every waking moment, in some cases for months before they carry out their attack. The idea that they're going to walk up to a mall and see a sign that says no weapons allowed, and say, darn it, I got to start all over again. It's absurd. It is, and so I think that this should actually prompt a conversation about the type of laws that, as you say, gun control groups like Everytown and Brady helped write in New York, because we know now, I think there's, no doubt in my mind anyway, that these gun-free zones are not going to stop somebody who is intent on taking as many innocent human lives as possible. But if it is a felony offense to accidentally, to even, again, inadvertently carry into one of these places, yes, you will stop people like Elijah Dixon from carrying in a place that has been labeled, gun-free. But you're also going to stop those individuals from being in a position to respond if, God forbid, an attack takes place in one of those locations.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly true. I think this incident disproves a lot of recent talking points. You heard after Uvalde, where the police, apparently up to 400 police officers, showed up at that scene before anyone actually tried to confront that shooter. Mm-hmm. But there was a lot of talk among gun control activists about how the police are so afraid of this AR-15 that this kid had, that nobody should have those things. Well, I mean, this is another situation where somebody took on somebody with a rifle, and it was just a average 22-year-old kid. He didn't even have a permit. This is another thing too. This constitutional carry comes into play here. Permitless carry comes into play. Eli Dixon didn't have a permit, but he didn't need one because Indiana had just passed permitless carry. In fact, I think it just went into effect
July 1st. Yeah.
Yeah. So this month. So yeah. That there's another point on that front. And then, of course, you have a situation where somebody who is ostensibly a good guy with a gun stops a bad guy with a gun. And so, that's probably why you're seeing such a harsh reaction from a lot of gun control activists, because it kind of goes against a lot of the things they've been saying recently. You can take on somebody with a rifle with a handgun. You might not want to. Nobody wants to. But it's not impossible. It happens, and it happened in this case. You don't need to wait an hour for hundreds of other people to show up to help you. You can act in the moment. You don't need to be a spec ops guy to take on somebody in this situation. This is a 22-year-old. He didn't have any military or law enforcement training, and he successfully stopped the shooter without harming anyone else. There's a lot of things that come into play here that are negative for these recent arguments we've heard in gun control circles about why these things happen and how to prevent them. It's obviously not a panacea. It doesn't mean that every mass shooting is stopped by somebody, a civilian with a gun, but it does disprove the fact that they can't happen, right? It certainly do happen. And it also, it hits in that, what is an unfortunate media sweet spot, because, obviously we didn't need this shooting to prove those facts, because, I mean, we had a very recent incident in West Virginia where someone with a handgun, an armed civilian, stopped somebody with a rifle who was shooting into a crowd of people.
We had an incident in Texas.
In that incident, though.
We had an incident in Texas, 4th of July, where Harris County, a guy took out I think it was an AK-47, and started shooting up his apartment and started shooting his mom. And the mom managed to make it outside. A neighbor saw what was going on. He grabbed his handgun and shot and killed the son, as the son was basically standing over his mom shooting her. Again, that didn't really make national news, but same thing. Right. It was, a guy with a handgun taking on a guy with a rifle, stopping the loss of life. You're right. We don't need
it.
We don't need this incident.
It does hit in that media sweet spot because people did die, sadly and horrifically. And that's what you need to get national news coverage. I mean, that's just the reality of the situation. If no one had been harmed other than the attacker, it doesn't get as much attention. That's just true, I think. Yeah. And so this happened to be an incident where it's clear that the guy was trying to kill people, because he did. And it was clear he was trying to kill a lot more people because he was attacking a crowded food court at a mall. And you had an armed civilian stop him in that process. And so this is a situation that's created that is going to generate more media coverage than the West Virginia situation or the Texas situation that you mentioned. And, obviously there are countless other examples. There's plenty of debate over how many self-defense incidents happen each year, but even the lower estimates, the lower credible estimates would put it at more self-defense uses of firearms than criminal uses of firearms. There's obviously the DOJ study that we've talked about before on the show that shows this. So there's plenty of examples, but this one hits that a specific type of incident that is going to get more media coverage than many of the other self-defense incidents out there. Yeah,
no, you're right. And it's interesting. I think ABC News had a piece yesterday about, it's rare for an armed citizen to stop one of these shootings. Really, really rare. You can't count on it. And of course, they quoted a lot of gun control activists. Well, yes, it is rare. First of all, listen, even in constitutional carry states, I don't think it's fair to say that, a majority of the population is carrying a firearm. It may be, 10%, 15% of the population, but it's not 50+%. But the fact is that according to the FBI, their recent report on active shooting incidents in 2021 found that I believe 4 of the 61 incidents that they reported on were stopped by armed citizens. Right. And so I would argue that, yes, while it may be rare, clearly it does happen. And if you have more people who are carrying, if you treat the right to bear arms in self-defense as a right and not as some sort of moral wrong, and try to discourage people from getting their concealed carry license, either through legislation or litigation or regulation, we will actually see more of these incidents stopped by armed citizens, and hopefully might even see fewer of these incidents overall, which I think is the real goal for everybody.
Yeah. Of course. I mean, that's the thing. Obviously, this is a better outcome than if that armed civilian had not been there, or he hadn't had his gun because of mall policy or whatever else. It's still not an ideal outcome. Obviously, people were killed. The best thing we can do is to prevent these shootings from ever occurring in the first place. But, that's obviously a much more difficult task and deserving of a lot of conversation and study and effort to lessen the number of these events. But yeah, I mean, and I would also note too that the good guy with a gun quote, if you're trying to fact check this old LaPierre quote, right, you'd have to include all of the times that the police intervened to stop. It's not just the whole idea is good guy with a gun doesn't necessarily have to be a civilian, right?
Right.
You're right that there were 4 in that report out of there were 60 incidents, 4 of them, and those were only 4 where somebody shot and killed the attacker. So there may have been some more where he was subdued instead of being shot by civilians. That can happen. So it's not the only thing that can stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy. It's not the only thing, but it is a common thing. There are far more of those incidents where police either arrested the person and stopped their attack or shot and killed them. So just to be pedantic about ABC's fact check, it's not just a good guy with a gun isn't limited to just civilians. Oftentimes the police are good guys, even if they do not perform perfectly as or even admirably as we saw in Uvalde. But yeah, I mean, there's quite a few more situations where somebody who undertakes one of these attacks and active shooter again is a little different than mass shooting, right? Because active shooter, they don't necessarily actually kill anyone. They might be intending to, but the majority of them don't actually aren't able to actually take anyone with them or finish carrying out their attack before being stopped. So it's a little different as well. That 60 is not how many mass shootings with 3 or more killed that we had last year. It's the number of people who tried to carry out a public shooting in a crowded area. But
Right.
But yeah, I mean, look, this incident, it's an important one to talk about because we don't get coverage of these things very often. Like I said, this is in a sweet spot that's going to get more media coverage. It's sort of a nasty, a gross way of looking at the news, but it's true. Like if it bleeds, it leads is not it's not.
No, it's a trope for a reason.
Trope reason,
yeah. No, you're absolutely right. And I think we will be talking about it, much of the consternation of the gun control groups out there who again want to label the hero in this story, the vigilante. Steve Gatowski of the Reload, thank you so much for coming on the program. Let folks know how they can sign up, support what you're doing there at thereload.com.
Yeah, you can head over to thereload.com and check out our membership options today, or just sign up for our free newsletter that goes out every Friday. Keep you up to date on the latest in gun news. It's a good supplement for what Cam is doing as well with Bearing Arms. So I think if you like what he's doing, you'll like what we're doing, and vice versa. So head on over and check it out.
Absolutely, man. Thanks so much for coming to the show. It's good catching up with you, and I look forward to doing this again very soon.
Yeah, and we'll have to have you on the Weekly Reload podcast very soon as well.
Always love it. All right. Thanks, Stephen. Stephen Gatowski from the Reload with us here on Bearing Arms, Cam and Company. I do appreciate Stephen joining us on the program. I realize it was a little bit beefy conversation there. So I tell you what, we're going to skip today's recidivist report and our good deed of the day. But I would be remiss if we did not leave you with at least an armed citizen story. So here it is from Houston, Texas, where police say a would-be robber was shot and killed by his intended victim. Yeah, this happened over the weekend, apparently outside of an ATM, where the armed robber thought he had an easy target. This was Saturday night. Just assumed, all right, guy's going to be distracted, I guess, by getting money out. It happened about 10:30 in the evening when a man was leaving an ATM, according to Houston police. That's when another individual walked up, tried to rob him. The victim pulled out a gun. Both men ended up firing shots. The suspect was struck once. Authorities pronounced him dead at the scene. The armed citizen in question remained at the scene, cooperating with investigators. This will be investigated, but again, at this point, everything looks to be a clear-cut case of self-defense. We'll keep our eyes on this story, giving more details as they become available. Now, we are out of time here for today's program, but we'll be back tomorrow with even more Second Amendment news and information. In fact, I think we're going to be taking a look at what's going on out on the West Coast right now, because there are a number of things to talk about, particularly in California. But you can get caught up on all of the day's top Second Amendment news and information that you need to know about by going to bearingarms.com. If you like what you see, you can also become a VIP subscriber. Use the promo code GUNRIGHTS when you go to bearingarms.com/subscribe. And you can get a significant savings on your VIP membership as our way of saying thanks for your support. We're going to give you exclusive content, stuff you won't get anywhere else, news stories, analysis, because your support does matter. And it really does make a difference. So thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your Tuesday. We'll be back tomorrow. Until then, be well, be safe, and be free.